I have this watercolor painting of a young woman in profile. This project started out as a short that I was going to post to the channel, but it turned out well enough that I'm re-editing it and making it a walkthrough video so you can get a better sense of my technique for getting the sketch developed using the Loomis method, and then going ahead and blocking in and putting in the color and taking it on to the completed end of a full-blown watercolor. As you can see, the reference I found on Pinterest was a black and white image, which meant that I had full range and freedom to choose the color palette that I was going to use in this final piece. So let's get started with a basic sketch using the Loomis method, which means you start out with a couple circles, a big circle and then a smaller circle on the inside of the big circle. I'm getting the eye line, the angle of the eye line at roughly the right positioning, and then I work in that triangular shape in the neck, circles for the shoulder, and figuring out where all the parts and pieces should roughly go. The eye line is halfway in the middle of the circle. The nose is halfway between the eye line and the chin, and then the mouth is halfway between the nose and the chin. We just kind of block all of those things, give yourself some reference points, and start working in the structure of the face. The triangle for the nose establishes the distance. I'm working with a profile mainly because there's edges to work with. A profile is a little simpler to work with and to do than a straight-on shot, a straight-on portrait of a person. There's more edges and angles to work with to get the facial features. And I think it's just a simpler means of practicing working with drawing people and watercoloring portraits. So I'm definitely working in getting all the structures in: chin, the jawline. Jawline goes up to the ear. The ear is in the position roughly where the inner circle is inside the overall larger circle that you start out with. In this case, it's only half of the ear because the top part of the ear is being covered up by the hair. And then working in the neck, doing a little shading, get a little structure to the sketch so that I'll have something to work with and go by when I get to working with the color. One of the tricks and things to be aware of when drawing faces is getting used to measuring and using relative position in establishing where various facial features and facial parts go in relationship to other items on the face. Like, where's the lower portion of the ear in relationship to the nose or the eye? How much space, how much gap between it? Are the angles correct? And then when drawing hair, you don't draw individual strands of hair. You try to draw the grouping, the locks of hair, to get a sense of the shape of the locks, the flow of the hair. And all of that, you just kind of work up, get it to the point that it reads right. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate. I was using the photograph as a jumping off point that I could use to get to a final piece. In this case, I wasn't looking and trying to capture likeness. That's a whole other level of hell that you have to go through if you're trying to do portraiture or do something that looks like somebody. So once the sketch is all finished, we can get started dropping in the initial color blocking. And I'm starting out essentially with a reddish color, which will dry to a nice pink. And I made a very conscious effort to break the edges of the drawing I did and pull that color outside of the figure to get a little looser feel to it, dropping in the purple into the hair just for a little different color, a little more density. And it's very wet. This was a wet on wet layer, starting out with wet on dry and then dropping in other colors into the wet area. So I'm working on a Strathmore paper, so it will stay wet longer. Although I have noticed with the Strathmore paper, as opposed to the Arch paper that the really good paper, the Strathmore paper will pill a lot quicker than the Arches will. So it's a little tougher than the Canson paper, but it will pill, so you don't want to overwork it too much. So I'm just dropping in a range of colors. It's very wet, that color spreads out, and it's going to dry lighter. Now while it's still wet, I've dropped in all the color I want to at the moment. I now have a damp brush that I'm coming in and lifting color out of the darker areas, creating highlights, lighter areas on the face, up there on the eyebrow, on the forehead, the upper lip, on the chin, on the lower lip. So just picking out some of those highlights. There's the cheekbone, right along the jawline. Sometime, I think there's a jawline swipe. There it is, right there. Okay, I'm mixing up some burnt sienna, mixing a little of that purple into it, adding some of that warm tone into the hair, kind of an auburn hair. Range of colors of the brown. So some blondish colors, some brownish colors, warms, and just the overall rough shape of the hair. It's still fairly damp. I can still drop in, and the color's doing a lot of movement. I'm adding a little more contrast into the shadow areas under the jaw, along the jawline, in the eyes, anywhere where it's dark. I'm just adding a little denser purple, actually some of that brownish color too in that, just for a little more contrast. Getting ready for stage 2, where we really go after some bigger shapes. We start getting more saturation, do some glazes, and start building that more complex color profile. Just bouncing around. Again, remember to do that. Just bounce around your piece. Don't get stuck in one area. Adding a little blush to the cheek, defining that cheekbone, the lips, the inside of the nose, right along that cheek. On the back side where the dress was. Mixing up that purple. We're coming in, really coming after some of that contrast. Finding the shadows, the darkest areas. Accentuating the difference between highlight and shadow. And now it's dried. And I mixed up, or will mix up, some pretty solid red for the lips there. Testing it, it was dry. Might have been just a little damp. And finding those shapes, those darker areas. And even though we're not at the detail and structure stage, some of the work I'm doing right now is structural. I had this sped up by about, I think 2.5 times. I think the overall watercolor took me right at an hour, 55 minutes, something like that. And we should have this tutorial done in about 25 minutes. Bring up the shadows on the eyebrow. The inner portion. I didn't mention this in the sketching stage, but you may have seen it. You always draw a orb, a circle for the eye, and that circle also serves as the shape of the eyelid. So if the eyelid is cutting across the cross section of the circle, the upper portion of it follows the shape of the eye, or the circle that you drew for the eyebrow, or the eyelid, the upper and lower eyelids. So just something to know. It's good to have that circle placed in there. And I'll do a demo, probably do a more extensive demo of the Loomis structure in an upcoming video. All right, so now a little more contrast and structure in the hair. And again, I'm using the underdrawing to kind of give me a sense of the kind of strokes that I want to make with the color. This is a round brush now, loaded up. It's a wet brush. But I'm making the marks in the direction that the hair is flowing. And I'm trying to leave some of those, that bits of the underpainting to show through. I want kind of a crunchy, scrunchy looking mark that is visual texture, and it will help the hair to read hair-like when we get to that point. So yeah, I'll be doing a full-blown kind of a breakdown of the things you need to watch and look for when you're constructing a face and you're drawing people. There are good rules of thumb to follow, and Lumis is a very, very solid way of going about doing it, especially if you're interested in figure drawing, figure painting. It's definitely the thing that I teach in my figure class, and teaching the students to really build that mannequin and that structure that you can then layer in all the facial features, the body parts, and using the relative positioning to get everything proportional. And boy, if you don't get those proportional things right, you'll see it right away. Anybody looking at the piece will look at it and tell that something's not quite proportional, not quite right. So right now I'm glazing in a secondary, a warmer color, more orange to it. The underpainting has more of a cool purpley, reddish rose color to it. So this has a little more warmth, and I'm dropping that in. Softening up, dropping it on, loosening it up, feathering it out, and just again building a more complex color profile for the skin with an underpainting and then glazing on top of it. So it had dried, and we have moved into the stage 3. This is where we're going to be working in lots of detail, contrast, structure. We'll glaze some more, and we'll continue building all of that color complexity. So several steps in this, I guess. Worked a little in. I guess it was kind of a cross combination between stage 2 and stage 3, but now I'm definitely coming in onto the hair, getting a little more contrast into it, getting a little more hair strokes, getting the direction for that bun on the back, the density behind and under the ear, the back side of the head being darker. It's a lighter highlighted area up on top. Yeah, there we go, a little denser top right on the bun on the back side. This is a very dark purple. Now I've mixed in a bit more of a blue, probably phthalo blue, a little ultramarine in there. So it's shadow now, so I did work a little cooler colors into that. Again, keeping in mind cool colors and shadows will help recede. And if it's a warmer color, it's going to come forward in general. Looks like I'm working with a number 4 round brush right there. So I'm loading the brush up, really ladling on that color. Glazing it in there just to kind of get a range of colors, bringing that cool shade into the under the jaw, behind the ear, down there by the neck, under the nose, under the chin, yeah. And at this point, we are coming into the point where still a few more layers of glazing, get the skin tone up a little denser, a little more saturated. Back to that nice rose color. Layer it on, feather it out. It is a different little process, and here we go, got a little yellow ochre, yellow, warmer tone to it, dropping it onto the skin tone. It is a challenge if you're working from a black and white image, so you're really having to invent your own color palette when working from black and white. And if you're in a figure class, of course you have a live model in front of you in color, so you have to kind of interpret and see and do a similar thing, but it is nice to have a live person in front of you so you can actually see the colors and how those colors interact in the atmosphere, the environment that the model's modeling in. So, all right, so I'm now moving in. This is towards the end of the piece, and I'm working with my Pro White, and I'm going to come in and rescue and work with white to bring back the highlights in the hair. And just drop in, this is the jewelry, as Joseph Zbukvik calls it, when you're dropping in all those little touches, those little sparkles into your final piece, that last little dab of work that really brings the final work into the piece to make it really sing. So I'm finding all the highlights in the hair, along the bun. It's a dry brush almost. I mean, it's a loaded brush, but I'm working, especially in the hair, in a way that it creates a dry brush effect with the texture of the paper. Little spot on the chin, right on the lip, just a little smidge of highlight. And again, I'm getting into that point where you have to start asking yourself, all right, is it done? When do I stop? Should I stop? And you know, this is the funny part with the students. When they're working with traditional media, they're pretty digital fluent now because of the students I have within the design program. They're used to drawing and painting with tablets. And I can get them to take a digital painting much further to completion than I can with a traditional watercolor. They'll reach a point where they're terrified to do anymore because they don't want to screw it up, which it can be good. At least it keeps them from overworking it. But then again, they're not taking it as far as they could with a little confidence and a little bravery. So this is the last little step in the piece. I wanted to put a little cool color in the background, right against the figure. A nice contrast, that warm color of the skin tone and that coolness in the background, just to have a pop to the figure. And that's it. This is the completed piece. I hope you like this tutorial. If you got any value out of it, hey, don't forget to give me a like and a subscribe. I really do appreciate it. I do hope I'm providing some value in getting you up and running with watercolor and making life a little simpler and not as frustrating as it could be. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.